No one in the Observatory restaurant spoke loudly. No one dared. Julian Croft sat with his back straight, the Egyptian linen napkin placed neatly on his lap. He didn't enjoy this space, he supervised it. The glass of water on the table, 2 degrees warmer than the required temperature. A fingerprint on the rim. A musician accidentally plays the wrong note. Every deviation was a reminder. Order is something that must be forced, never something that comes naturally. His gaze shifted to his son, Liam Croft, 11 years old. The carbon fiber leg braces emitted a soft hiss as the boy shifted. That sound made Julian clench his fists. He had spent millions to design them, lightweight, flexible, the most advanced in the world. But they still couldn't fix that deviation. The boy's back was slightly curved. His shoulders were slightly uneven. Everything was almost right. And to Julian, it almost was a failure. He didn't see a child sitting before him. He saw an unbalanced equation, a flawed project. The boy didn't look at him, didn't speak. But it wasn't because Liam was sullen. It was because Julian had designed the evening this way, devoid of emotion, devoid of chaos. Every pause was a victory. Every spoonful of soup eaten in silence was a command obeyed. Julian recalled the accident as a compressed, colorless image. Lena, his wife, stolen in an instant. Liam survived, but no longer whole. Julian did the only thing he knew: control, rebuild, master the situation. He gathered his grief and sealed it away in board meetings, in project plans, in absolute order. Even this dinner, a dinner between father and son, was not an opportunity to connect. It was part of a relationship recovery strategy, time-scheduled location, selected menu, pre-approved. Julian glanced at Liam again. The boy was tapping his finger lightly on the tabletop, making almost no sound. A part of Julian wanted to stop him. Another part, the part he always tried to suppress, ached. Silence. Not peaceful, but a suffocating pressure of his own making. And in that pressure, Liam seemed to slip further away, one more step toward a world he couldn't control. Julian picked up his knife, adjusting the steel blade to align perfectly with the fork. Everything had to be perfect, even if it meant starting over with his own son. The first note was played. Claire de Lune. Liam recognized it instantly, not with his ears, but with a feeling. He stopped tapping his finger on the table. His back tensed, and his heart skipped a beat. That melody. It was Mom. Not Mom who was gone, but Mom who was alive. Mom in a sea blue dress, twirling with him in the living room. The fabric of her dress brushed his cheek, her hair smelling of sweet oranges. Her laughter mingled with the piano. It was his parents' wedding. It was their song. And now it had become his. He glanced at Julian. His father's jaw was tight. His eyes were downcast, but Liam knew he recognized the music too. No one else in the restaurant paid any attention. But inside Liam's head, the piano's sound seemed to shatter the cold glass flooding his chest, warm but painful. He took a deep breath. He had sat still. He always sat still. Dad wanted it that way. Dad needed it. But this music, it was like it opened a small door inside him, a door he had kept locked for years. He looked around. The waiters glided by like ghosts, cold, precise. But there was one who was different. Clara Hayes. She didn't look through him like the others. She placed each glass of water down so gently as if it had feelings. Her gaze didn't skim, it rested. Light, but real. He didn't know her name, but he knew she saw him. Not the Croft name, not the braces, not the victim or the legacy, but him. He stood up. The sound of his leg braces hissed against the marble floor. The entire restaurant paused for a heartbeat. Julian turned, his brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. Liam could feel the cold air emanating from his father, but he didn't back down. He walked slowly toward Clara. Each step was a small revolution. When he was just one step away, he held out his hand. Not to dance, not to cause trouble, but to connect. No words were spoken. Just a small, trembling hand offered in midair. A silent plea. Please see me for me. The entire restaurant held its breath. He didn't know if she would take his hand. He only knew that this was the first time he had chosen to be seen. Not by his father, not by the world, but by someone who could see past the wall. Clara didn't move right away. For a fraction of a second, she heard every detail, the clink of silverware hastily set on a plate, a soft gasp from a nearby table, and the hurried footsteps of the manager behind her. But she didn't look at them. She looked at Liam. The boy's arm was still outstretched, slightly trembling. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with anticipation, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, just without knowing it would arrive with that particular song. Clara had studied the body language of children, trapped in silent homes where emotions were things to be suppressed or controlled. She saw it in Liam, the closed-off posture, the careful steps, the eyes that always asked for permission even when no one was giving orders. And now he was breaking it with a small, terribly brave act. This wasn't a random request. It was a non-verbal cry for help. She set her tray of water on the nearest table slowly and deliberately. No apologetic smile, no clumsy movement. Just a clear decision she would not continue this cold, luxurious play. She walked toward Liam, her eyes never leaving him. Then she stopped. Gently she leaned down and took his hand. Not to pull, not to lead. She was just there, an anchor point. She said nothing. She just breathed, slow, even deep. And Liam looked at her as if for the first time someone wasn't afraid of the silence inside him. He took a deep breath, exhaled. They breathed together. There was no dance, no dramatic gesture, just two people standing there in the frozen space, creating a small island of presence. The manager stopped mid-stride. Julian shot to his feet, his eyes looking like they could tear everything apart. His lips were pressed so tightly they turned white. Clara saw him, and she understood. He wasn't angry because she broke the restaurant's rules. He was angry because she dared to give his son what he, with all his power, money, and control, could not a moment of peace. Jealousy, humiliation, shame. It was all clear on Julian's face. But Clara didn't back down. No regret. She gave Liam's hand a gentle squeeze, then let go. They stood there for a few more seconds, as if holding on to something precious that the world hadn't yet managed to ruin. Then Clara turned and walked away, her steps light, unhurried, leaving a space behind a space Liam had never had a chance to fill. That stillness had finally begun to move. The office door closed behind Clara, the sound as low and heavy as a warning. Julian Croft stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass window, looking out at the grey Manhattan sky. He didn't turn around. "You know who I am, don't you?" His voice was cold, carrying not anger, but the authority of a man accustomed to giving orders. Clara didn't answer. She sat down in the leather chair opposite the desk, as if she were walking into a consultation, not a reprimand. Julian turned, placing a white envelope on the ebony desk. "I propose a solution," he said, his tone as even as a presentation. "A simple agreement. You won't be fired. In fact, you will never have to serve another glass of water again." Clara glanced at the envelope. She didn't need to open it to know how much was inside. Julian's face said it all. It was a life-changing number. And in return, she asked, her voice as light as the wind. Julian leaned back, lacing his fingers together. You spend time with my son. See him once or twice a week. Do what you did last night. Communicate, connect, call it what you will. He paused for a beat. But on my terms. Clara nodded slightly, not angry, not sarcastic. You're trying to outsource your grief. Julian's brow furrowed. I am offering a logical solution. She tilted her head. No, you're offering a payment to avoid facing the truth. The air in the room grew heavy. Clara slowly stood up, took a worn piece of paper from her pocket, its edges creased, and placed it next to the envelope. This isn't a business card, no logo, no QR code. She pushed the paper slightly toward him. Julian glanced down. Grieving Parents Support Group. Tuesday 7 p.m. St. Jude's Church basement. No charge. Clara walked toward the door, but stopped. Your son doesn't need someone who is paid to care, Mr. Croft. He needs his father. Not the control freak version, not the boss, but a human being who can feel, who can be wrong, and who can hurt. Julian said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the flyer as if it were a foreign object in his world. Clara opened the door, letting the light from the hallway stream in. You have all the power in the world, she said. But the one thing Liam needs, you can't buy. You can only choose it. The door closed silently. Julian sat down in his chair. The envelope remained on the table cold. The old flyer was wrinkled and askew. An invitation, an accusation, a chance. And for the first time in a very long time, Julian Croft didn't know what he would choose. The elevator to the 89th floor stopped with a soft ding. Julian stepped out, his heavy footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The boardroom was empty. There was only the light from the massive architectural design projected on the wall. A new skyscraper, the Croft Horizon project, curved glass facade, minimalist lines, perfect to the centimeter. Julian stood still, staring at the blueprint. But today, he didn't see greatness. He only saw emptiness. The clean lines were like cuts. The perfect proportions were as if isolated from real life. This building had no heart, just like him, just like the home he and Lena once shared, just like the ever-widening distance between him and Liam. On his desk, his phone buzzed with a notification for an important meeting. Julian ignored it. His gaze fell on the flyer Clara had left. It lay there amidst billion-dollar contracts like an ineradicable stain. Old paper curled edges, a corner of smudged ink. It didn't belong in his world. And perhaps neither did his own feelings. Julian sat down in his chair, his back slumping, losing its usual commanding posture. Old memories flooded back, but not the good ones, the times he wasn't there. Liam's 6th birthday, he was absent to close a deal with a pharmaceutical corporation. At their wedding anniversary dinner, Lena wore her blue dress, waiting for him in a restaurant with burnt-down candles, while he was in an emergency Zoom meeting. The most painful memory was the night of the accident. Lena had called him 3 times. He didn't pick up. It's just something small, he had thought at the time. Now, nothing was small anymore. He looked at the blueprint again. Beautiful, yes, but cold. Barren. No laughter, no memories, no Lena, no Liam. The flyer drew his eyes again. Tuesday 7 p.m. St. Jude's Church, basement. No charge. Julian let out a soft laugh. The basement. A man like him didn't go to basements. He lived on the top floor, commanding the world from above. But that top floor had never helped him sleep well. His hand trembled for the first time as he reached for the flyer. The paper was soft and uncertain, unlike what he was used to. And then, with no drama, no grand decision made, He just stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the office. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew that tonight was Tuesday, and he was so tired of the high floors. It was time to go down. The taxi stopped in front of St. Jude's Church. No sign, no greeter, just damp stone steps and a faint yellow light spilling from a side door. Julian got out without his designer coat, without an assistant by his side. Just him and a nameless anxiety. The iron door creaked as he pushed it open. The basement was like another world. The smell of dampness, old wood, cheap coffee, flickering fluorescent lights, peeling paint on the walls. Wooden chairs are arranged in a messy circle. In the center was a small table upon which lay an array of strange instruments, hand drums, wind chimes, a water flute, and a plastic maraca with faded colors. No one greeted him, no one pointed, no one cared that he was Julian Croft. For the first time in his life, he was invisible. And that was both terrifying and liberating. Clara sat in a far corner, not in her uniform, without makeup, just a young woman sitting quietly, holding an old tambourine. Liam was there, sitting next to another parent on a wooden chair. He was holding a long rain stick, shaking it gently. The sound falling from the stick was like rain on a tin roof, soft, but enough to make Julian's heart clench. One father began to tap a slow rhythm on a djembe drum. A mother hummed a sad melody. No one was leading. There was no conductor. Every sound was imperfect, offbeat, out of tune. But all of it was real. Julian sat down in an empty chair. His hands trembled slightly. It felt like sitting in a pile of rubble, not of the room, but of himself. Clara gently pushed an object toward him. A small, rustic, unpainted wooden wind chime. Not a word, just a slight nod. Julian looked at the simple object as if it were a weapon. The hands that had signed hundreds of contracts that controlled entire markets were now trembling before a wooden wind chime. He reached out his hand and took it. A slight movement. A clear ting rang out, fragile, faint, but not out of place. It blended into the chaos, becoming part of the unnamed melody. Julian closed his eyes. Something broke inside him. Not a specific emotion, but a heavy block he had held in his chest for years, finally being exhaled. Tears streamed down, unrestrained. Not loudly, just falling silently. Not from sadness, not from regret, but because for the first time he allowed himself to feel. And in that broken melody, Julian Croft, the man who built worlds of steel and glass, had laid down his arms. All that was left was a father, a husband, a human being learning how to listen again. There was no emotional speech, no reporters, no headline "Julian Croft changes his life." There was only him, a man who once controlled America's largest corporations, now standing in his kitchen, learning how to cook pasta without it sticking. Liam sat on the kitchen counter, holding a cookbook, reading each step with great seriousness. Julian listened and followed. No judgment, no correcting his posture, no taking command. And somehow, the boiling water became a victory. But the change wasn't just in the kitchen. It began with the decision Julian made the day after the group meeting. He called the board of directors. The Horizon Tower will not be built. The entire room went silent. "I've changed the plans," he said. "I'm building something else." Julian sold the land he had bought for the new office tower. The entire sum was transferred into a new trust fund, the Lena's Melody Foundation. Its goal is to provide free music and art therapy for families recovering from tragedy. There was no launch ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a small, simple room with old guitars, a few percussion sets, and a wooden sign with Lena's name hand carved on it. Julian went to the support group every week, not as a donor, but as Julian. No title, no power. He learned to listen to other fathers talk about their loss, about the feeling of helplessness, about the fear of not being able to protect their children. He also learned to share, at first just a few broken sentences, then a whole story he had previously hidden, how he had rejected Lena's final calls, how he had chosen a meeting over coming home. Clara listened quietly. She didn't comment. She didn't lead. She was just there, just as she had stood by Liam in the restaurant. And then there were evenings, with no group meetings, no cooking, just Julian and Liam sitting next to each other in silence. But not the tense silence that once enveloped them. It was warm and quiet. No need for adjustments, no need for control. Just two people are present for each other. One afternoon, Liam was assembling a wooden model of a spaceship. Julian came closer. "Need my help?" Liam nodded. Julian didn't take over. He just picked up a piece and asked quietly, "Where does this go?" For the first time, they were building something together. Not an empire, not a perfect image, but something small, rustic, and real. A small step. Reconnected thread. Julian realized that to rebuild, first, he had to know how to tear down. 1 year later, not a ceremony, no honored guests, just a quiet Sunday afternoon in a small studio in a corner of Brooklyn, a small branch of the Lena's Melody Foundation. Liam sat on a wooden chair, his back straight, his hands cradling a cello. The leg braces were still there, but smaller, more streamlined. He no longer needed crutches. His movements were still slow but steady. Julian sat right beside him. No phone, no files, just an old notebook and eyes following his son. "I want to try a part," Liam said, his voice small, as if afraid to break the peaceful atmosphere in the room. "Go ahead." Julian nodded. The bow touched the strings. The first sound emerged slightly out of tune, a little shaky. But it was clair de lune. Slow, hesitant, uneven. The boy wasn't playing the music. He was searching for it. Julian closed his eyes. The image of Lena in her blue dress appeared. But this time, there was no suffocating guilt. Just a gentle, comforting nostalgia. A memory that had survived the pain. Liam stopped halfway, looking up at Julian. "It's still not perfect," he said, frowning slightly. Julian smiled. A real smile, not forced, not hiding anything. "I know," he replied gently. "It doesn't have to be perfect." Liam exhaled, relieved. He adjusted his posture. Julian placed a hand on his son's shoulder, not just as a gesture. It was a silent commitment. "I'm here. I'm listening. I won't leave." Liam nodded. "I'll start again from the beginning." Julian said nothing. He just sat there, his hand still on Liam's shoulder, quietly. He began to draw the bow again. The melody rang out, still flawed, but clearer, more confident. No one in the room tried to make the moment eternal. No video, no recording, just a father and son, an unfinished piece of music, and a love that didn't need to be perfect. Outside, the afternoon sun shone through the small window, casting a shadow of them both on the wall. Next to the cello, the shadows of Julian and Liam overlapped, inseparable. No more distance, no more cold high floors, no more empty silence. Only real sound, real presence, and a melody being written anew, slowly, hesitantly, but full of hope. There are stories that need no heroes, nor do they need miracles. They just need a moment when a father lays down the weapon called perfection and takes his son's hand with a bare heart. Julian Croft didn't conquer the world, but he conquered himself. Liam didn't need to walk perfectly. He just needed a true companion. And Clara, she reminds us that sometimes a silent act can shake even the most seemingly immovable souls. What's the lesson? That the most precious thing isn't control, but presence. Not strength, but the courage to be vulnerable with the one you love. If this story touched you, hit subscribe on Toch Story right now. We're here to tell real stories that touch you deeply. And who knows, you might be the one to write the next melody.